of the cerebral hemisphere. So we are taking one half of the cerebral hemisphere. The principal sulci, which are very prominent, is one of these which appears first during development, called the lateral sulcus. Lateral sulcus separates this portion of the brain, that is the temporal lobe, from rest of the cerebrum. So the lateral sulcus passes behind and slightly upward. Whereas another sulcus of this lateral or superolateral surface is the central sulcus, that comes downward about for 7.5 centimeter towards the lateral sulcus. But one special feature of this sulcus is that it cuts the superomedial border, and therefore it also appears for a little distance on the medial surface of the cerebrum. So the part of the cerebral hemisphere in front of this central sulcus will make the frontal lobe. This portion is the frontal lobe, and that should be above the lateral sulcus. So the lateral sulcus, above lateral sulcus, and in front of central sulcus, the portion of the cerebral hemisphere is forming the frontal lobe of the cerebral hemisphere. Another sulcus we can see chiefly on the medial surface and close to the posterior pole. That sulcus is called parieto-occipital sulcus. And the beauty of this sulcus is it also crosses the superomedial border, but it is chiefly on medial surface, unlike the central sulcus, which is chiefly on lateral surface. Here the parieto-occipital will cross the superomedial border and appear for a small distance on the superolateral surface. Similarly, a little front of this occipital pole on the inferolateral border, we get a small notch. This notch is called the pre-occipital notch. Now one imaginary line, if drawn from this pre-occipital notch up to a small part of that parieto-occipital sulcus on the superolateral surface, then the part of brain behind this imaginary line is forming the occipital lobe of the cerebral hemisphere. If the lateral sulcus is also carried forward behind up to this imaginary line, joining the parieto-occipital sulcus with pre-occipital notch, then the part of brain below the lateral sulcus and in front of this imaginary line will make the temporal lobe of cerebral hemisphere. So which part is still remaining? That is the part behind the central sulcus, in front of this imaginary line joining the parieto-occipital sulcus with pre-occipital notch, and above the lateral sulcus. So this piece of cerebral hemisphere makes the parietal lobe.